I'm here with Ruth Lane Wiersba, who is a money coach, and we're going to talk today about couples and money. Ruth is a former accountant and financial planner who now provides coaching services to help people meet their financial goals. So thank you for meeting with me, Ruth. I really appreciate taking the time in your busy schedule.
Thank you, Allison.
Yeah.
It's good to be here.
So tell me, what are the biggest mistakes that you see couples making when it comes to money?
Well, of course, there are a lot of them. Probably the biggest
A lot of mistakes.
A lot of mistakes, yes. Getting into debt, using credit cards, using consumer debt to do the things that are fun and do things that really meet their immediate needs but not their long-term needs. So usually when there's a lot of debt, there's no savings, no long-term, long-range plan. Yes, and at an emotional level, it also creates a lot of stress.
Yeah.
Debt is just very, very stressful when we don't know how we're going to pay for the things that we've acquired.
Right.
And so then there's a communication issue. You know, the whole communication thing happens when couples are not talking about their debt or the lack of planning. There's often kind of an embarrassment about money, that if we don't talk about it, it must not exist. And so it's a very difficult, even in the best of times, it's a difficult subject to talk about.
Yeah.
Because there's not just, it's not just about dollars and cents. There's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of background, a lot of history that we deal with, or perhaps haven't dealt with around money. So
they can have, someone can have feelings of embarrassment or guilt or
yes,
maybe even fears.
yes, a
and
lot of fear.
That can prohibit them from talking about the realities of their financial situation and maybe their debt.
Right, right. And then we get into the whole, just the logistics of talking about money. You know, people, if we don't have a plan and we haven't really talked through a lot of things, money will come up, but usually in a bad sort of way. It'll come up in a bad time. It'll come up when the credit card bill comes, when there's not enough money to, pay for something that needs to happen. And so the whole communication thing happens in a negative context if we're not being proactive and making a time to actually talk about money.
Yeah. So the tendency is for people to wait until emotions are running high, or maybe they're already in an argument, or they get a really big bill, and then they sit down to try to talk about it, and it's just so
well, it wouldn't
intense,
be a sitting down to talk about it. It's more like a, what? What is this?
Yeah.
And so I worked for many years as a CPA and a financial planner. And so I was talking with people about money, but I always knew that we really, just by talking about the dollars and cents of money, we weren't really getting to the real core issues.
Yeah.
And a lot of times in my office, people would talk to me about things that were deeper, that were more emotional. And yet we had all these tasks that we were trying to accomplish. We were trying to plan, we were trying to get taxes done, we were trying to do the basic, the hardcore money stuff.
Sure.
And it didn't leave a lot of room to do what I call the softer side of money.
Yeah.
And I think we have to, if we really want to get to the core and really succeed with our money, we have to look at both sides. You can't ignore the dollars and cents, but at the same time, we can't ignore the feelings and the emotions and the history that comes up around money. What did our parents teach us about money?
Right.
How did we get
not.
where we are? Or not.
What did they not teach us?
Exactly.
Family history.
Right. We can sit down and work out a budget, but until we really address some of the emotional needs, oftentimes we try to fill those emotional needs with spending, with material things, instead of looking into the deeper places, sort of like what you do.
Yeah.
There's a component where we really just have to look at what's behind the spending problem, what's
Right.
behind the lack of communication,
Right.
all those kinds of things. There's a whole world
Yeah.
of exploration.
Right.
to
Because
be done.
otherwise, something like a budget, I'm guessing, is just a Band-Aid.
It's
if you
just
don't
numbers
really
on a
look
piece
at-
of paper.
Right.
You know, it is it's not even a Band-Aid. I can't tell you how many people will say, I did this budget. I spent all this time on it, and I had this beautiful budget, and I had it all worked
The
out.
spreadsheet,
The
amazing spreadsheet.
the amazing spreadsheet. And it's in the drawer. I did that
Yeah.
8 months ago, and now it's in the drawer. And
Right.
and a budget is a tool that we work with on an ongoing basis. It's not something that we create and then put in the drawer because, you know, quite frankly, most of us can't even remember what it says unless we get it out on a regular basis.
I
and
feel
do
like
some
you're
work with
speaking
it.
directly to me right now. I think I have a budget sitting in a drawer somewhere.
Well, a lot of times I work with people who really aren't very connected to their money.
Mm.
There's this thing called money, and it comes in and it goes out, and they're not very aware of how much comes in or how much goes out. And with couples, a lot of times one person in the marriage or the partnership is very aware, and the other person is kind of like, oh, you know, she takes care of that or he takes care of that. I don't really have to worry about that. So
Kind of making assumptions that it's happening.
Yes, very often there are assumptions that somebody's done the investment, somebody's taking care of the tax return, somebody's making sure that we're saving for the future.
Right.
And sometimes those are just false assumptions.
Yeah.
You know, we can pay things online, we can get things paid automatically. There's so much that can happen with our money that we can get really, really, really disconnected from
Yeah. Yeah.
it. And
It's interesting because there's a huge parallel for me in helping couples through couples therapy with asking that sort of fundamental but basic question of how are we doing in our relationship? How does it feel to be in our relationship right now? And it sounds like you're saying the same conversation ideally is happening with couples around their money. How are we doing with our finances? How are we doing with a budget? How are we doing with planning for the future?
well, and in fact, we call it our relationship with our money.
Yeah.
You know, we actually do have a relationship with our money. Sometimes it's very negligent. You know,
Yeah.
we're just not paying very much attention to that relationship or to.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's hard.
So your job, I'm guessing, then, is to instill some hope.
You bet.
Yeah.
You bet.
Yeah.
I've seen people do some pretty amazing things when they really decide that it's time to get this thing worked out.
Okay. Which is, what are some of the best things that couples can do to have a good experience around managing their money together?
Well, you know, again, the soft side of money, the hard side of money. I talk about that all the time. But just taking care of the tasks that need to be done, paying attention to money, having a relationship with it, having a good relationship where we give
Right.
it some, you know, looking at it frequently. So often I see people who aren't looking at their money until it's tax time or until, you know, something catastrophic happens. They just haven't really paid very much attention to it.
Yeah.
So I really, really encourage my clients and teach them how to track and how to keep up with what's going on and what to be looking for. In the same vein, or on the other side of that, just as couple talking about it.
Yeah.
You know, don't assume, don't make any assumptions
Right.
about money. Get informed.
Yeah.
Both parties in a partnership need to be informed about what's going on, long-term, short-term,
Yeah.
and just, you know, very often I see people or I talk to people who will say, I'm just not very good with numbers.
Right.
And
And then I avoid them.
so I avoid them.
Yeah.
Right. And I like to remind people this is not advanced calculus.
Right.
This is math that you can do with your cell phone. Literally,
Right.
you can get out your little simple calculator and add and subtract.
Yeah.
You don't even have to do it in your head. Don't try to do it in your head.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Saving, so critical in planning for the longer term.
Mm.
Even for the short term, saving is really how we keep ourselves from getting into debt. If we can learn how to save for the short term and those things that inevitably come up, it's just so helpful to have a little nest egg that's not for the long term. It's just for, paying the bills when things come up.
Yeah.
So those things, again, on the hard side of money and on the soft side of money, absolutely, we have to talk about it if we're in a relationship. If we're not talking about money with our partner, there's a whole side of our money that we may not even know about.
Yeah.
So we have to chat about it
Yeah.
at a time when we're not emotionally charged about
Yeah.
it,
Right.
So setting an appointment with your spouse is a really good idea.
Yeah.
Having a specific time to talk about what's going on
Right.
with your
Right.
money.
Well, and I love the idea of kind of being, having a plan about that and being proactive with that, because I imagine emotionally that sets you up for a much less distressing situation than if you use the really big bill or tax time as the impetus for having that conversation. There's something very, to me, calming about let's be proactive. We care about how this impacts us in our relationship. Let's help
Let's just
ourselves.
face it. Yeah. We have
Yeah.
to deal with money all the time.
Right.
Why should we deal with it with a paper bag over our head?
Right.
Not having that information.
So last question for you, Ruth. So from your perspective as a money coach, what signs would tell you that a couple might benefit in their financial goals from attending couples therapy?
Oh, well, as a therapist, I'm sure that you work with people in communication all the time.
Yep.
And this communication with money, such a big, big, important issue in our lives. And we can get in so much trouble if we're not communicating about it.
Mm.
So I know that what you do as a therapist is help people with that communication. And, money is such a charged issue. It's so emotional that if we haven't learned how to communicate at a basic level about, lesser things that aren't maybe quite so important as money, then when we get to money, it's almost impossible. I can always tell when I'm working with couples how much work they've done on their communication, and perhaps I love it when they're coming from therapists because they've already sort of worked out some of those
Right.
communication skills,
Right.
and that is really, really helpful in the money arena.
Yeah.
So good work, Allison. Keep
Oh,
it
thank
up.
you. And thank you, Ruth, for joining me today and telling me all about what you do and
Thanks
how
for
you help
having me.
people with their money.
Thank you very much.